Students, so this is course Gland 342 and the topic is Thyroid gland part 1. This is lecture 6 and I am Dr. Sadiq Ibrahim, Assistant Professor, Department of Chemistry, Rohart University of Science and Technology, and you can find these lectures on this web link, which is www.ms.cohort.edu.pk, and please subscribe to this web link. So the topics to be discussed include the anatomy of thyroid gland, that is the structure of the thyroid gland, the functions of the thyroid gland which they perform on the human body, hormones of thyroid gland, that what are the hormones which are secreted by the thyroid gland to perform various functions. Then the functions of the thyroid hormones, that what are the thyroid hormones and what functions they perform. And then the chemistry of the thyroid hormones, that we will discuss and study that how they are formed, what is the precursor molecule, and how they are differing from each other. So about the anatomy of the thyroid gland, this is the diagram which is showing that the thyroid gland is present near the neck region, around the trachea and larynx. So the thyroid gland is located anterior and caudal to the cartilages of the larynx, and it is the largest endocrine gland in human beings. And the anatomy of the thyroid gland is butterfly shaped bilateral organ with two lobes joined by an isthmus. Each lobe is about 4 centimeters long, and the normal weight of the non-goitrous adult thyroid is about 20 grams, but it depends on the body size and iodine supply, so it can be over 20 grams or under 20 grams depending upon the physique of the human body. The thyroid is highly vascularized and receives blood from the superior thyroid arteries and branches of the external carotid artery. Now the gland is drained by corresponding veins into the internal jugular vein. The thyroid glandular tissue is comprised of spherical follicles that vary in size. Now each follicle is lined with cuboidal epithelial cells, which are also known as the follicular epithelium, that encircle the inner colloid space. Now this is the thyroid cartilage, and this is the cricoid cartilage around which the thyroid gland is present on both sides. And this is the thyroid gland, This is the trachea around which the thyroid gland is encircled, and here we have the recurrent laryngeal nerve, and on top of the thyroid gland you have the parathyroid gland. So this is the anatomy of the thyroid gland regarding the structure of the thyroid gland as well as the location of the thyroid gland in the neck region. Now move towards the thyroid gland functions. So main function of the thyroid is to control the body metabolism, that is collectively the anabolism and catabolism of the macromolecules like the carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Now the only function that is performed by the thyroid gland is to synthesize the hormone, and that hormone is then performing the necessary functions required for the human body. Now the hormone synthesized by the thyroid gland has effect on all the human body and the tissues of the human body, and the function which is performed by the hormone secreted by the thyroid gland is to increase the cellular activity, as a result of which the metabolism of the cell increases. Now here you can see that this is the real image of the thyroid gland, and on top of the thyroid gland a smaller glandular gland is also present, which is known as parathyroid gland. So the thyroid gland produces and secretes two metabolic hormones. Now these two hormones are thyroxine, which is also known as T4, and triiodothyronine, which is also known as T3. Now these two hormones are required for the homeostasis of all the cells of the body. Now the homeostasis is the metabolic equilibrium actively maintained by several complex biological mechanisms that operate through the autonomic nervous system to offset disrupting changes. Now the influence of the T3 and T4 is on the cell differentiation, on the growth of the tissues, as well as the metabolism of the cells. So it means that the thyroxine and triiodothyronine, they are affecting the synthesis of different types of the cells in the human body, as well as they are helping in the growth of the cells and tissues and the metabolisms of the different cells of the human body. Now the triiodothyronine or T3 and tetraiodothyronine or T4 are the two principal hormones of thyroid gland. Now chemically they are iodothyronine hormones, which means that they contain iodine along with the attached amino acid derivatives of the thyroid. Now, these hormones are the only hormones known which contain iodine with biological activity. And normally, these hormones are referred as the metabolic hormones. Now, these hormones have substantial effects on the essential physiological processes. Now, they also stimulate the protein production in the body tissues, that is the biosynthesis of amino acids, which leads to the synthesis of different types of proteins. And T4 of thyroxine is secreted in large amounts, but the T3 or triiodothyronine is more active in comparison to the T4. Now, these hormones are considered to be the metabolic hormones because they can access and affect every tissue of the human body. So, moving towards the functions of the thyroid hormones, so they stimulate the metabolic activity in almost all the tissues of the human body. Now, one of the functions which is performed by the hormones secreted by the thyroid gland is to regulate the overall metabolism, and specifically this is being regulated by the T3 hormone of the thyroid gland. So overall body metabolism means that whenever there is a need of increased catabolism, that is the breakdown of carbohydrate or fat or protein molecules, then that is being stimulated by the thyroid hormones. Or if there is a need of the biosynthesis of carbohydrate, protein or fat molecules, then that is being increased or stimulated by the anabolic activity, which is being stimulated by the thyroid hormones. Now, T3 also increases the basal metabolic rate, which is also referred as BMR. One of the functions is to increase the body heat production, which is normally happening in cold weather or cold conditions. Now, these thyroid hormones, they also have calorigenic effects, and in terms of calorigenic effects, the T3 hormone increases oxygen consumption by most peripheral tissues. So the T3 binding is also observed in almost all the tissues of the human body, and for the thyroid hormones, the thyroid hormone receptors are present on almost all the tissues of the human body. For example, the heart, the skeletal muscle, the liver and the kidney. These are markedly stimulated by thyroid hormone. Now, moving towards the calorigenic effect, so that is effect is a result of increased metabolic rate and increased oxygen consumption by the cells. So when the metabolic rate increases, so obviously more heat is generated, and as a result the body temperature rises. Since the energy use is measured in calories, that is why this effect is known as calorigenic effect. Now, apart from that, the brain, the gonads, and the spleen are heat sensitive, and therefore they are unresponsive to the calorigenic effect of thyroid hormones. So now moving towards the chemistry of the thyroid hormones, that the thyroid hormones are made up of which type of molecules. So the thyroid hormones are the derivatives of the amino acid, that is tyrosine, and they are bound covalently to the iodine atoms. Now, basically, these hormones are made up of two tyrosine which are linked together with each other, and along with the addition of iodine which is attached to the aromatic rings. And in the coming slide we will see the structure, the chemical structure of the thyroid hormones. So moving towards the chemistry of thyroid hormones. So here in this diagram you can see the structures of different thyroid gland hormones. So this is the structure of the tyrosine, which is an amino acid. So you have a hydroxyl group at the top which is attached to the aromatic ring. Then below you have a CH2 group, and with the CH2 group you have another carbon attached, and then you have an amino group attached to that carbon and a carboxylic group attached to that carbon. So that is the basic structure of the tyrosine. And then the two tyrosine, they are linked together along with the addition of iodine to make up the structure of thyroid hormones. So first of all we will look at the structure of thyroxine, which is also known as T4. So this is one of the modified structure of the tyrosine, and then another tyrosine molecule is attached covalently with the oxygen linkage to the above tyrosine molecule. And then you have iodine atoms attached to the aromatic ring at these positions, and the rest of the structure of the tyrosine molecule is the same as in case of tyrosine. So if you count the number of iodine atoms covalently linked to the tyrosine molecules are 1, 2, 3 and 4. So it means that the thyroxine, which is also known as T4, has 4 iodine atoms covalently linked to the modified structure of the two tyrosine molecules to form the thyroxine. And it is known as T4 because it has 4 iodine atoms covalently linked to the modified structure of the tyrosine amino acids. Now moving towards the structure of triiodothyronine, which is also known as T3. So you can see that this is known as T3. So it is obvious that it has 3 iodine atoms which are attached to the aromatic rings of the modified form of the tyrosine molecules. And the rest of the structure of triiodothyronine is the same as thyroxine, but the only difference is the absence of iodine atom at this position, which in case of thyroxine is covalently attached here. So only because of the absence of iodine atom at this position of the aromatic ring, this is the modified form and results in the formation of triiodothyronine. Now there is another modified structure which is known as reverse T3, and this is the inactive form of the thyroid hormones. And if you look and compare between the structure of triiodothyronine, that is T3, and the reverse T3, so you can see that there is presence of iodine atom covalently linked to the aromatic ring of the modified form of tyrosine molecule, while in case of T3, the active form, there is no iodine present here. So here the iodine is not present in T3, but in reverse T3 the iodine atom is present, which is covalently linked to the tyrosine derivative form. And in the next molecule of the tyrosine, you can see that there is no iodine present here at this position, covalently linked to the modified form of the tyrosine, while in case of active form of T3, the iodine atom is present, which is covalently linked to the aromatic ring of the modified form of the tyrosine. So that is how there are two differences between the active form of T3 and the inactive form of the T3. So these are the references for further reading, and I will recommend the linear biochemistry as well as the Guyton and Hall textbook of medical physiology for further reading and explanation. And another book which is very important, which is the Thyroid Fundamental and Clinical Text by Braverman and Utiger. So these books are very important for the clearance of the concept of the topic, as well as for further understanding and going into the details of the thyroid gland. So thank you, and if you have any questions, then you can ask by putting your questions onto the KCMS portal, as well as you can ask questions by writing in the comment section of the Trust Media server, where I will be uploading these lectures.